Martin, and we got into a conversation about the judicial system with Judge Maria LAZAR, who is on the Wisconsin Court of Appeals, District 2. And I think
Yes.
I got all that right. So we were having this great conversation about, okay, well, why does this happen in the judicial system? And why does that happen in the judicial system? And which level is the other thing that's going on? And we got through all that, and then we got to some sticky stuff toward the end, and we were like, oh no, you got to come back. So you were just here like a couple 3 weeks ago,
Correct.
and we had to have you back. So I know that we wanted to make sure to get you back in here. So Judge Maria LAZAR, thank you for coming back for your second show with us already.
Thank you for having me. And again, these are my comments, nothing to do with the courts, just my personal views. I know we had talked last time about civil commitments. Did you want to start there or TPRs?
Well,
What did
first,
you
I want to
want?
make sure for people who did not get the benefit of hearing you the first time, I want to at least make sure people know, who are you, right? So Judge Maria LAZAR, how did you come to be a judge?
Well, interesting question. So I actually went to law school, but in this case, Georgetown. I came back to Wisconsin, where my family's
Well, not as
from.
great a school, I guess it was UW, but you know
Correct.
that's okay.
Correct. Went to so I came back to Wisconsin, started practicing. Eventually, went to the Department of Justice, Wisconsin. Then ran for judge in Waukesha County, my home county. That's a circuit court level. There's about 256 of those judges.
Okay, and so when we say a circuit court, we're really talking about if there's anything criminal going on, if there's anything that is civil in the case of like divorces, property, estate, contract, a whole series of things that we think about like going to court. We're really
Correct.
talking about the circuit court is really where people often are going to.
So the circuit court is where you're going to see most people have a connection with the court. Anything that's not a municipal ordinance or something in your local government level, it's a civil court issue. So you're correct. It's criminal, it's family, divorces, separations, it's juvenile, it's termination of parental rights. It's also civil. So any dispute, contract, real estate, anything like that is at the civil level. And that's where most people see judges and courtrooms.
Mm-hmm. So you ran for that and won.
Ran for that and won, ran again, and then I ran for the Court of Appeals. The Court of Appeals, there's 16 judges. And what we do is we correct mistakes or errors made by the circuit court. We're not insulting the circuit court, having been there. What we're doing is we have more time to step back, look at things, and determine if the law was followed or not. And then the next level is going to be the state Supreme Court, where there's 7 justices, and they set policy and they look at what we as the Court of Appeals did.
Mm-hmm. And so I think last time you were telling us as well that, folks who feel like, hey, they've had their day in court and maybe it didn't go the way they wanted it to go, they do have options. They have alternatives. They can, in fact, appeal to the appeals court, right?
Correct.
And you said for quite a while in the state of Wisconsin, we didn't even have an appeals court. So there really was nowhere else to go but the Supreme Court, which only takes a handful. I think the last time you said there were 500 petitions to ask them to look at things, but they took only 20.
Correct.
Right. And so there's not a lot of capacity to take cases up at that level. It's really this Court of Appeals that's the workhorse. It's doing a lot of this work to really review what's happening at the circuit court level. Somebody's unhappy about the outcome and they want a chance to actually have somebody else look at it. You're that somebody else.
Right. It's a second set of eyes. And the Court of Appeals, so you have an automatic right to get to the Court of Appeals. You have to ask permission to go to the state Supreme Court. The Court of Appeals, if there's an opinion that we issue, any one of the judges, in groups of 3 usually, if they issue an opinion and the Supreme Court does not take it, the Court of Appeals opinion is the final word.
Okay. And so, and you see how, you were telling me last time, how many cases do you actually end up seeing?
Well, last year, District 2 saw 741, or we resolved 741. All of the Court of Appeals resolved about 2,500.
Wow. So that's a lot. And you then personally end up writing opinions, right?
A lot.
And so how many do you think you actually write opinions for in a given year?
Oh, in a given year. I was going to say in a month's time, we typically write maybe 4 or 5 opinions.
Okay.
And some of them are published, so they're longer, more detailed. Some of them are shorter, they're 4 to 5 pages. But we do a lot of writing. And basically, if you want to be on the Court of Appeals, you need to read a lot and you need to write a lot.
Okay. All right. And become an attorney and
Right. Have been an attorney.
and run for judge.
And run. Right.
Okay.
Correct.
Other than that,
Other than that.
So we got a chance to talk last time about, just what happens in that process and where the checks and balances are. Because even within the court, the judge might be the final say at that level, but that judge is not the final say forever necessarily. I've
Correct.
got options to come to you. I've got options to come to other people. As you're going through, what are the kinds of things that the Court of Appeals addresses? I mean, what are the kind of errors that happen?
So a lot of the errors have to do with erroneous exercise of discretion. That's a fancy way of saying
Yeah, I was
that
going to
the
ask you for the
court
definition
looked at
of
it. The circuit court looked at it and made a mistake, and
Okay.
they decided something wrong.
Okay.
So in a lot of cases, and it's nothing against the circuit courts, because you got to understand the circuit court is sitting there and people are in front of them and they're asked to make a decision in the middle of a trial,
Yeah.
in the middle of something, and they don't have time to sit down, pull out all the books, look at all the things, go on the computer, make their decision.
Because they've got
They
a
have to
lot of
decide
people
right
coming
away.
to them, a lot of court cases coming.
So when I was on the criminal bench, I mean, we would set calendar 8:30, there'd be 9 to 10 cases. And that would happen for 8:39, 9:30, all the way through the whole day.
What happens if a court case takes longer than you scheduled for it?
You fit it in or you adjourn it for another day. And when you're on the criminal bench, when I was in the criminal bench, I was overseeing about 500 criminal actions.
Wow.
So, and it got worse during COVID. So the Court of Appeals has an opportunity when someone says, hey, the judge looked at this, the circuit court judge, and just made a mistake. Or the law isn't developed and we're asking you to develop it and
Okay.
write something about it.
Okay. So when you say criminal bench, you're really talking about judges get assigned a different type of law.
Yes.
Like some are family court and they're focused on what's going on with the kids, what's going on with the couple, whether they're getting divorced or there's parental rights issues involved, etc. And so there are other folks who are assigned different kinds of law that they will specialize, and then they rotate. Is that
so? It's a little different for each county. In Milwaukee County, you have so many judges, that's such a big county, that they really focus in and they're on just one discrete issue, but they're also, for example, if it's a children's case, they could be just on doing termination of parental rights.
Mhm.
In Waukesha County, we basically had one judge doing
Yeah.
all of those.
Right.
But a judge has their rotation, their division, and then they just focus on that. But now if you go to some other counties, they consider themselves general practice and they do everything.
Well, because it's a much smaller county.
Right. So if they only have 4 judges, they do everything. Or way up north, there's one judge.
Yes.
And he or she does everything.
Yes. Judge Jackal. I'll
Yeah.
probably see him this weekend. So yes, so you're talking about these specializations and etc. And so, but again, the volume of cases
Is amazing.
because we see every time we're watching the news and we're seeing something that happened criminally, something that happened where even I know there've been crashes, some of the police chases. All these things end up in the court. They're basically much of what we see on the news ends up in the court some kind of way.
And it takes a while, because if you look at, so if you went into Milwaukee County right now or Waukesha County and you looked at the age of a case that's on the calendar today, most likely this is 25. It's probably a 23 case or
Wow.
a 22. I had some that would be 5 years old.
And this is for the circuit court.
That's the circuit
So
court.
for the first time you're getting into actual court, you could actually be years away from when the actual thing happened.
Right. In criminal, they do something to allow defendants an opportunity to demand a speedy trial. But
Which is one of our constitutional rights.
it's a right. So that puts you up a little bit ahead. But even then, so by the time you get up to the Court of Appeals, your case is old.
Wow.
And so we try to do as quick or turnaround as we can. But you heard our numbers. We can't
Right.
be as fast as we'd like.
Right. And again, there's only so you're divided up into 4 different districts for the Court of Appeals.
for the state of Wisconsin.
Right. And so Milwaukee is its own district.
Yes, because you have so many circuit court judges.
Mhm. And then you said to me that basically from Kenosha, from the state line,
All the way up to about Manitowoc and Sheboygan and
Okay.
Fond du Lac.
So-
That's D2.
so you
District
get
2.
all the way up to the lake,
Yep.
and all the way down, skip Milwaukee. That's the second.
District 2.
Okay. And then
District 3 is the entire top of the state. So if you draw a line right across the state, everything up above Madison, Dane County, that's all District 3.
Right, which is southern. I mean, so you think about like, man, all those counties.
But some of those counties have one judge.
Right.
So what they try to do is divide the state into districts where we have the same number of circuit court judges.
Mhm.
So the input is the same for each district.
Yeah. And then the fourth one
That's
you said to me
from
is like from-
Dodge all the way over to the Mississippi.
right,
to Eau
right.
Claire.
Just amazing. Just amazing.
Amazing.
So basically, I can have my my date in court rather. I just might not get it this year.
Well, you can ask for a fast track or an expedited, or if it's a termination of parental rights, we have to give you a decision within 30 days
Mhm.
of the last brief,
Okay.
because it's so important. You're talking about children and whether or not they're going to stay with the parent that has their rights terminated, so they're no
Mhm.
longer the parent, or they're going to go to a foster home or be adopted. So that's
Mm-hmm.
so important. The legislature decided 30 days.
But that's a rare
It's rare.
instance in all the cases you're going to see.
Correct.
That's a very rare thing that's
And
going to
then
come up.
the Supreme Court doesn't have that same rule, though. So if they take a termination of parental rights case, they just have to do it in their term. Their term starts in September and ends end of June.
Yeah, I still don't like this theory about they only work a few months a year. That does not.
We talked about that last time.
Yeah,
and I
I'm
keep
just
saying
not-
they do work more than you
No,
think they
no, no.
work.
You said that they work, but I don't know. If you don't hear cases, then something doesn't sound right. If you're a
Prepping.
judge and you don't hear cases, I don't know what else you're doing.
They're prepping. They're
Pre-
working.
That's a lot of prepping. That's months worth of prepping for a few months worth of work.
Correct. Well, I actually I said I wasn't going to comment. on that, so no,
Well, that
no
was
comment.
that was me. I said correct that. There you go. But so all right. So we got into some of this, and there's some thorny places, So for instance, I know that there was one case in the news recently about a woman. So we can't possibly get to you yet. But a woman who is in a protective payee situation, right? She has her Social Security. She's got Social Security disability payments that are coming. She has some mental health challenges. She cannot take care of her own money. So they've assigned her a protective payee who's taking care of the money for her to make sure she has a place to live. However, they found her on the streets. So then the question is, well, wait, what happened to the money? What happened to the housing? How's this? And so the family now, is the situation where the family is wanting to, go after somebody about why is the money coming? And among these things, we then tripped into a conversation as well in the last show about the commitments, right?
Correct.
Which sounds like a nice word, but
It's
the
not.
commitment is somebody else is deciding to put you in an institution where you need to stay because you cannot take care of yourself, or you're a danger to yourself or others.
Correct.
That's-
And so not commenting at all about the woman, but
Yes.
there are cases called civil commitments.
Yeah.
And so that's when the county or an individual goes to the circuit court and says three things: that the subject, the person, is mentally ill,
Mm-hmm.
that they are a proper subject for treatment, which means that they can be treated, and that they're dangerous to either themselves or to society. So you need to prove those three things: that they're mentally ill,
All right.
they can be treated, and there's some danger.
Okay.
And now the danger, there's 5 categories, won't go into them too detailed. But the problem, or the situation here, is usually the individual, who, by the way, has a right to an attorney, and they
Okay.
get an attorney.
And if they can't afford an attorney?
No, an attorney is usually appointed.
Okay.
Usually they cannot afford attorneys.
Okay.
So there are public defenders that represent these people, and they do a very good job.
Okay.
So they fight for their rights, and some people just agree. They say, yes, we're mentally ill. Yes, we can be treated, and yes, there's some danger, and they agree to a commitment. Now, commitment can be as simple as You just have to go in, and tied with the commitment, there can be an order that you get medication
Okay.
that you don't want usually.
Yeah.
So a commitment can be, you're going to live in a group home, you're going to live on your own, but you're going to get this medication. And if you don't do that, the court's ordered that someone can come take you, bring you in, and give you the shot or make you take the medicine.
Okay. Now
Okay.
this is kind of where
So
we were
that's the
before about the whole.
least restrictive. And then
Okay.
you go from there all the way to now you're in a facility where you can't leave. So you can be put in one of these places in this whole line, the spectrum. So this area of law is really important, and it comes up a lot to us on appeal where people challenge whether these
Okay.
were found and there were sufficient facts. But it's very important. It actually was, for me, one of the hardest areas to work in because these individuals, one, don't think that they're mentally ill,
Mm-hmm.
and two, they don't understand that they're going to harm themselves, and they're on certain medications which usually have bad side effects, but without the medications they do horrible things to themselves.
Okay.
We had one
Or potentially to others.
or to other. We had one individual who felt that he was that there were demons in him. So he went and he would put frying pans in the stove and then heat them up and then burn himself when he wasn't on the medication. That's not good.
Trying to burn the devil out.
Yes. So there are a lot of people that are,
Wow.
and I'll tell you too, during COVID, we saw a lot of young people who were had mental illness issues.
Well, you're talking about isolation during that
A
period
lot of it
time?
was girls,
Right,
young
okay.
girls who were trying to kill themselves.
Wow.
And that's really hard to look at a person who tried to walk in front of a train or jump off something
Yeah.
and deal with that. So this is a really important issue, but you really have to get it right.
So okay, you've actually done this both at the
Yes.
circuit court
Circuit court
level
level.
and at the appeals court level, right?
Yes.
So talk a little bit about what does it take? You know, we can all watch this on the news and we can armchair this, but you can't do that. You've
No.
actually got to make a decision, and sometimes the decision is to put people in very in constrained places, right? In places where they're restricted.
So, and I do have to step back. So as a judge, we make that decision, but a civil commitment, you can ask for a jury. So you'll get a jury of 6, not
Yeah.
12, and they issue a verdict that 1, the person's mentally ill, 2, they're proper for treatment, and 3, they're dangerous in some respect. Living in conditions that aren't safe, or walking around outside in the middle of winter with no shoes and no socks, or just other things. But when it's the judge who has to make the decision, it's hard to look at someone who's arguing with you that they're not mentally ill and they sound very coherent because they're on the medication.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the doctors say, yes, but when we take it off, this is what they do. And that it's very hard to make that decision. I mean, it's one thing to be a judge and say, you've been convicted of a crime and I'm going to put you in jail or
Yeah.
prison or something. This is almost to me harder to
Wow.
look at someone and say, I'm going to say that for the next year, it's only a year, you have to take medication.
Wow. We're going to pick this up right after a break because I think this is just fascinating in terms of how this works. Come right on back. Hey, WNOV family, we are back. You're listening to Will Martin, and this is The Difference. And my guest today is Maria LAZAR, Judge, Wisconsin Court of Appeals, Second District. And she's come back to talk to us about some of these really thorny issues in law. We were just talking before the break about, I think we all are concerned to make sure that people who have mental illness are taken care of. As you said before, not everybody who has a mental illness feels they're mentally ill. And sometimes there are these civil liberties issues of really, when do we force somebody to take medication? When do we force somebody to actually have to be in a care facility where they are not allowed to leave on their own? And so we stopped just at the break talking about what it's like to be a judge and having that person before you, where you got to make a decision as to whether or not that person walks away or that person's actually going to a restricted facility.
Right. So the question in what judges see when they look at the room, when you're on the bench on a civil court, circuit court, and you look at the bench and you look at everyone who's sitting in front of you, it's sometimes hard for lawyers and people who are not in the law at all to understand. I mean, people think it's power, it's wonderful, but the problem is it's more than that, because you're making decisions that impact people's lives. You're deciding if they're going to get a certain amount of money. You're deciding if they're going to be on probation or be in prison or be in jail, which is a different thing than prison. You're deciding if they're going to be inpatient in a mental institution. You're making all those decisions. You're deciding if a parent who is begging you to keep their child that they've beaten, if they're going to lose rights to that child forever. You're also doing the good things. You're deciding a child can be adopted. But it's an important step, and you have to step back and think about what judges do and how hard it is to make those decisions, because you're the last really decision. Because on appeal, as a court of appeals, I'd say 90% of the time we're affirming what the circuit court did. So that circuit court judge is not the final word, but they're a big word in the case.
Wow. So you have a right to an appeal.
Right.
But as you say, 90% of the time, the appeal is going to go against you.
And that's for a good reason, because as a circuit court judge, I see the people who are sitting in front of me. I look at the witnesses when they're talking, and I make the decision, are you telling the truth or are you lying? And I look at those people. When I'm in the court of appeals, I'm reading a piece of paper that says what you said. I don't see if you're smirking. I don't see if you're smiling. I don't see if you're nervous. I don't see if you're twitching. I don't see any of that. The circuit court judge does, and that's why their decisions are so important. When they find those facts, we almost always agree with their facts. They get the law wrong sometimes, but the facts and what the witnesses say and weighing them, we agree with the circuit courts.
So it's an important distinction. You talk about the fact that the circuit court sees the people.
Yes.
Right. So because of, absolutely, people are coming to court, right? Whether they're doing by online or virtual, or they're physically coming into the court, the judge is seeing them.
Exactly.
Right? And they have their right to be seen and to be heard.
Correct.
Okay. But that the appeals court is different. All you're getting is a piece of paper, the four corners of the page. You don't see the people. There's no pictures. There's nobody with a video.
Sometimes we see pictures.
You do,
Sometimes we see videos.
Okay.
So we had a case where someone wrote a song when they were incarcerated, and the question was whether the song was actually a confession to the crime, which we determined it was, because they were rapping about how they had done something which was the crime. Wow. So we see that, but in general, you're right, it's on paper.
If I did it.
Yeah.
This is sounding like.
So yeah, don't do that. That's just.
Do not write a rap song while you're in prison.
No, he was being held pending the trial, where he was writing about what he did. Don't do that. Goodness. Don't do that. Wait till afterwards.
Okay, so in the rare circumstances, you may see a video if it pertains to what the court case is.
Right, but normally it's the piece of paper, and then sometimes attorneys come in, they argue. But we never hear from the victim or the witness or the parties. We hear the attorneys only.
So you don't start over.
No.
the circuit court really starts the process, and then you're judging based on what happened at the circuit court level. You're really not
Correct.
like, there's no new ground you're trying to cover, right? You're really trying to decide whether or not the circuit got it right or didn't get it right.
Not with the facts, unless
Yeah.
it's something absolutely 100% incorrect. There's an easement, which is lines on real estate, and the circuit court just drew the wrong line, and everyone knows, hey, it was the wrong line. But normally, whatever facts are found, we look at those facts and we apply them to the law.
Yeah.
So we don't change that, and we shouldn't,
Mhm.
because that would increase our workload by 1,000%.
Well, plus, there's the complication of, if you start getting new information,
Yes.
Somebody's arguing the case completely differently by the time they get to the appeal, it's really clogging up the system too, because now you become a circuit court in a sense.
Right. And we don't do that. So let's say, for example, that we find out there are all these facts that should have been brought up, but the
Mhm.
circuit court said no.
Yeah.
What we can do is we can reverse and send it back and make the
Remand
circuit
it.
court, remand it, make them do it
I
over.
was watching TV. I heard that. I heard that term.
Yes, we remand it, which is the legal phrase for we send it back to the circuit court judge and we say, do it over.
Okay.
So, and then they'll come up with new facts. And if it comes back up to us again, we go with those facts. And the same with the state Supreme Court. They never redo the facts. They're just looking at the pure law.
Yeah. So, Judge Maria, tell me this. What happens when a judge is just reversed a lot of the time? You said there's 10% of those cases that do get reversed. What happens if I live in a community where the judge just keeps getting reversed? In other words, they get it wrong. The Court of Appeals keeps saying you're wrong. What happens to that judge? I can get fired from my job if I'm bad at my job. Can a judge get fired?
Well, in some respects, yes. So judges in Wisconsin are elected. So if you have a judge that is constantly reversed, they're not going to lose their job in general. But the next time they're up for election, hopefully another individual would challenge them and say, elect me, not that person, because they're constantly being reversed. So obviously they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, but the name recognition, name ID on, incumbency is a thing in Wisconsin elections, right?
It is.
And so, short of not being reelected, is there anything that happens to a judge who's just incompetent?
Not really.
Not really.
I really hate to say it. Judges can be impeached, but
Okay.
that's such an extreme remedy, and it never really happens. I mean, so if you had a judge who committed a crime, that's something different.
Yeah.
If you have a judge who's just flat out incompetent, which I don't think there are hardly any, if at all, in the state of
Mhm.
Wisconsin,
Mhm.
I think we have a great group of judges.
Okay.
But if there was someone, hopefully they would get the message, one, they're being reversed a lot, and they would try to clean up their act. Or two, I really hope someone would challenge them. And
Okay.
I hope they would tell the public, hey, you deserve an individual on the bench who gets it right.
So I've heard attorneys say that they wouldn't go, especially in smaller communities, wouldn't go against the judge because they're still going to have to practice law in that same county.
That's a fine line. So when I was practicing, you never want to insult a judge because they have inherent power to sanction you or hold you in contempt. And I always felt, though, if I made a mistake, that I wanted the attorneys to bring it to my attention. I never took offense.
Mhm.
If I made a mistake, I wanted to get it right. Not all judges feel that way, and some of them seem to have a little bit of an ego sometimes.
No.
So yeah, we talk about that in my family occasionally.
Okay.
There's a little bit of an ego, so you have to be careful. But it's hard for an attorney who's practicing in a county maybe where there's one judge, two,
Mhm.
and if you insult the judge on case one, in your next case they're going to remember that you insulted them. So you have to be really careful of what you do. But I honestly believe that our judges try their very, very best and try really, really hard, and they don't take that out on people. And if there is a judge that does do that, and I can actually remember way back in my private practice that there was one in Milwaukee County who was that way, and they were voted out.
Okay.
And
okay.
that's, I think, the remedy.
So the other flip side of this is folks who feel like I'm not going to get a fair shake in front of that judge.
You can
Right.
ask for a substitution.
Okay, so I can ask change of venue or substitution. Is that
Change of venue means you move to another county.
okay?
And then you're going to get another judge usually,
Yes.
but not necessarily, because sometimes you're in front of a judge and you ask to change venue, and they say, well, we'll get a jury from county
outside.
B instead of A where you
Okay.
are. But if you change venue, you basically will get a new judge. If you ask to get a new judge, when I started in criminal, people didn't know how I'd rule, so there were a lot of substitution requests. And if
Mhm.
you do it within a certain amount of time, it's an automatic. You can ask,
Okay.
it's called recuse. You can ask that the judge not be your judge because you believe they're biased. That's also a tricky one because now you're telling the judge, hey, decide that you are biased. And it, judges should recuse. Let's say my two brothers are lawyers. If
Mhm.
they came in front of me, I can't decide that case because one, everyone's going to say I'm going to decide for my brothers, or maybe I would decide against
Yeah.
them on purpose, but I still can't decide that case. So I'd have to recuse. But if you really believe the judge is biased, you can ask. And then that goes up the system all the way to the state Supreme Court, and they'd make a determination.
Well, meanwhile, I still haven't had my case heard.
Exactly.
All we're arguing about is who's going to hear my case at this
Exactly.
point, right? So
So you just
years are
add-
going by.
You just added another 9 months to a year to your
Yes,
case.
yes, yes, yes. So
And be really careful. It's sort of like if you're going to kill the king, make sure if you shoot to him, make
yeah,
sure you take him out.
yeah.
If you try to knock out the judge that way and you lose,
So they would have been better off just to ask for a substitution. I just need a different judge.
If
period.
you do that, you have to do that
And then
right
I'm not-
away, though.
Right, and then I'm not actually taking the risk of
Correct.
having them feel like I'm insulting them.
Correct. And quite frankly, I didn't take it as an insult,
Mhm.
but that's my own personal view.
Yeah.
So I don't know what other judges did. If you subbed on me, that's fine.
Okay.
And if I thought there was a conflict, I would say, this is the situation. If either party has an issue, I'm off the case.
So, Judge, for in Wisconsin, is it the case that there are standards and you can automatically be forced to be recused, or does every judge have to decide whether or not they decide to hear a case or not?
There are standards, but each judge makes that determination. So on the circuit court level, and there's a U.S. Supreme Court case that talks about this. Won't tell you the name. It's too in the weeds, but every judge makes the decision themselves. So if you're in the circuit court and you say, nope, I don't have to recuse, it then will go to your presiding judge. They'd look at it and they say, no, she was right. She doesn't have to. Then you can go to the Court of Appeals with a writ, a special proceeding.
Yeah.
That goes a little faster.
Okay.
And then if this Court of Appeals says no, and then it goes to the state Supreme Court and they say no, then that judge stays on.
But Judge, if I feel like, hey, I know that person, I know that person's nephew, I know that person's daughter, son, parent, etc., and that
and you would hope the judge would recuse.
Right, but they ultimately get to decide.
They decide.
Even if I feel like, hey, they might be biased against me.
No, they decide.
They decide.
They decide. And and sometimes we get appeals that come up and the issue is the judge did it wrong because they should have. And it's not the question of whether there is bias, it's whether there's the appearance of.
Okay.
So if the Court of Appeals says, hey, you know what? There's no way that any reasonable person looking at this would say that this judge could be impartial, then they should have been off the case.
Okay.
It's very unusual if you have a judge who basically can't be impartial. This person injured someone in their own family or did something. They're going to step back, hopefully.
Judge, I think a lot of times hear stories about people who have been wrongfully convicted, who are sitting in a jail somewhere, oftentimes for decades. It seems to always be like a murder case. Whatever happened, somebody was a witness. Maybe they, felt they needed to, or maybe they thought that was the person on reflection later on. It comes out. Yeah, that really, truly, maybe they didn't really 100% see that person, or they kind of got prompted into. These stories come up periodically where we hear about people who've been in 20, 30 years in jail or in prison specifically, right? But then sometimes we hear the case where they still don't get out, even if the person's come back and said, hey, I really, I'm having guilt ridden. I was wrong. Judge, I really was wrong. Prosecutor says, hey, we were really wrong. Somehow that person still is not out today. What's going on there?
So there are rules of how many times you can appeal. So if if it in criminal cases. So if someone's in a criminal case, they're sentenced to 20 years, 30 years, and they come up with reasons why their trial was unfair, reasons why the facts aren't right. You only get a certain number of times you can appeal that.
Okay.
But let's say 10 years, 15 years later, someone does say, I was the eyewitness and I lied. So that the defendant, now the inmate, but the convicted defendant can bring that appeal automatically because it's a newly discovered
Okay.
circumstance. But there are really hard and fast rules about what they have to show. And, if the DNA shows it definitely wasn't that person, that's really, really nice. If it's more eyewitnesses, the eyewitness says this, but there were 3 other witnesses who were there and they said that. Sometimes the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court will say there's just not enough to tilt the scales. We talked about the civil commitments. We
Yeah.
talk about these people
Mhm.
who are in a circumstance where they're innocent and they've been convicted. I find that that's very rare that happens in our system.
Mhm.
But I also think that our Constitution, our rules, our laws are designed so that everyone gets a lawyer to help them. Everyone has the ability to argue it, and people have the more and more chances to bring their case in front of a judge or judges who are impartial. And maybe I'm optimistic, but I like to say that I think that we usually get it right.
Mhm.
Now, you're right, there are DNA cases where they prove that the person wasn't the individual who committed the crime, and that's really, I think, very rare and unfortunate, and I wish it never happened. But if that's 1 in 30,000, I don't think our system needs to be thrown out. We have a lot of safeguards, and I think those work usually 99.9% of the time.
So you told me that you did not grow up in a household. I mean, you used an example of a couple of brothers who are attorneys, right? But
Right.
but you grew up in a household where there were no attorneys in the family,
Nope.
no judges in the family.
No.
So what made you dream up that you could be a judge, that you could be an attorney if there was nobody around you that was doing this?
So as a child, I loved puzzles. I loved mysteries. I liked fairness. I wanted to be in a profession, and I looked around and thought, what's a good profession that I can enter? And I looked at medicine and I said, you know what? I just can't really see myself ever cutting someone or stabbing, and I hate needles and
Yeah,
things
thank
like
you.
that. So I thought the law was
Somebody will be in trouble if they come at me with a needle.
I thought the law was a really good profession to enter into. And so I went into that. So if someone is out there, and I speak to young individuals, I go to schools, high schools, great, lower schools as well. If you think that this is something you want to do, and if you have a passion for defending a point of view, be it for the state or for the defense, keep that in mind. Marquette Law School puts on a summer program.
There's the moot court.
There's a moot court program, but they also do a summer program where they bring in young students and they teach them what it is to be a lawyer. And in today's day and age, I think more people should look at this as something they want to do. Now it's a big lift because you need 4 years of college and then
Yep.
3 years of law school. So that's
Yeah.
7 years of your life. So if you go straight through, you're not getting your degree till you're 25. But it's such a great profession, and people should realize that you actually matter. It makes a difference.
Okay.
I'm not saving anyone's life in that I'm not curing their disease or operating on them, but I matter in their
Well,
life.
but you're saving somebody's liberty. I mean, the idea that you can make a decision as to whether or not I can walk out of that court, or I got to go to jail, or I got to go to prison, or I got to go committed to an institution. That's a huge amount of power to decide, someone's freedoms.
It is. And so when I said the 7 years, add 5 more on, because you have to be a lawyer for 5 years before you become a judge. So you've been ingrained in the
Wow.
system. But if there are young people who are looking around and saying that, maybe they don't want to go the medical route, that's a lot of time too, and they don't want to do that. This is an area where you can do a lot of things. You can do transactional work, real estate work. You can work for companies. You can do trademark work. You can do a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Well, that is fascinating. So really wonderful to hear that there are opportunities for our young people too, if they're interested, like you were, and want to take that. We're going to come right back after this break. Have as a wonderful guest here for the second time, just in a few weeks, is Judge Maria Lazar, who is on the Wisconsin Court of Appeals, second division, second district. And we are talking about just, we've now talked about, hey, how come people can get committed to having to take medications they don't want? We've talked about being committed to having to be in an institution that I don't want to be in. We've talked about, the ability to appeal your case, and whether or not, you said there's an automatic appeal, and the fact that there are ways that we do have checks and balances, but that, there's only so many of those checks and balances too.
Correct.
Let's talk a little bit to the reverse. We just finished talking a little bit about, like, how did you become a judge, and what does it take for a young person to want to do, and what's the commitment for all that, right, to get there. But let's also talk about some of the things that some of the trends that are happening now are not great. The idea that these days people who are upset with judges are taking it way beyond being upset in the courtroom. Some folks have come and actually harmed judges at their homes. Talk a little bit about kind of the security situation for judges today.
So in Wisconsin, in fact, I testified in front of the legislature. The legislature just passed some 3 laws that deal with security for judges to protect us, because basically our homes are, people know where we live, people know where we work. And I liken it to the fact that now in today's society, people used to, if they were annoyed at someone, if they were annoyed at a judge, maybe they'd write a letter. Maybe they do something like that. Now they'll go online and they do that, but they do the next step. We had a judge up in Upper Wisconsin, Judge Romer, who had retired and hadn't been on the bench for quite a while, and someone who he had not sentenced, someone who he had lowered his sentence, put him on a list, came and had several other people on that list, came to his house to kill him, and did.
Wow.
He broke in, killed him, and the only way they caught this man was that the judge's son fled, jumped out the window, ran away, got someone, and the police came back in time to catch this man because he had a list of other people he was going to target. We're seeing judges, federal judges, we're seeing circuit court judges, we're seeing individuals who are shot in their courtrooms, we're seeing them shot outside in their parking lots, in their driveways. It's a scary world.
And then, there's the viral video of the guy who actually
Jumping.
he literally, from a stopping point, was able to jump up on the bench and grab the judge.
And that's actually funny, but not really funny. But when we have security, when you're on the circuit court, as a court of appeals, we don't see many people. But on the circuit court, security came in and they talked to us. And I used to have this little, someone gave me it's just a rock that was sitting on my bench. And they told me, get that off your bench because someone could jump, grab it, and throw it at you.
Wow.
So there are a lot of things you have to think about. You have to think about the security where someone's just going to be annoyed at you. For family court cases are horrible. Sentencing judges who sentence someone, family members get annoyed. I had a Thanksgiving that happened.
Divorces, as like you said, family court.
That's
that's got to be, it's very contentious.
I had one Thanksgiving, I sentenced an individual to prison, and his son was very, very mad and made a lot of threats, and they calmed him down. But then my husband contacted me and said there were people driving around our house. So we had a nice Thanksgiving where we had law enforcement kind of watching my house.
Wow.
It turned out not to be them. It was okay. But it's a scary world when people look at you as a target and they don't see that we are trying to do the best we can. I actually ran into someone once as well who I had in a jury trial and sentenced him, and you have 500 cases. I don't recognize every face, but they recognize you.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to think about it when you go places. You have to think about it when you're traveling. We're told not to tell people we're judges. If you're on a plane, you don't say, oh, I'm a judge. You say, oh, I work for the state, or I'm boring, or whatever you want to say. But it's a horrible situation that we have to fear that and look at that. I know that politicians get the same thing, but it's also sad to think about families. I mean, I had to warn people in my family as well to be aware that something could happen. And, we're working really hard and doing a lot of work for the state. And to have to add that on is just one more level of commitment and dedication that judges have to the state of Wisconsin
Yeah.
and every other bench that they're on.
But if people want it to get better, if people want the system to get better, then they got to get involved with the system. And
Correct.
so for young people who are thinking about what am I going to do, for others who are thinking about, where I'm going to go with my career, there are opportunities in law enforcement. There are opportunities in the judiciary. And not everybody's a judge.
No.
Who's in the judicial system, right? So you've got bailiffs and other folks that are also important parts of the judicial system.
So every judge on the circuit court has clerks. We have individuals, men and women, who work for us, do the processing. And it's always amusing if we know we're going to be a case that's on television, our clerks know about it because they're going to be in on the shot when they show the judge in the camera shot. So they know that, they should fix their hair or do something to look a little better that day. But there's a lot of things that individuals can do if you want to be in the judicial system.
Yeah.
There's probation as well for the Department of Correction. There's people who work as clerks. There's people who assist. I was also involved in drug treatment court,
Okay.
which is individuals who committed certain level of nonviolent crimes, but it was because of drugs. And sadly, I think my youngest was in their teens and my oldest was about 65.
Wow.
Who just started drugs at 65.
Oh, wow.
I mean, bad news. I mean, you can get addicted now so easily, but there are people that help with those individuals. And
Yeah.
if they go on the straight path for about 24 months, they get their sentence wiped.
Wow. We've actually got a caller. And so, caller, come on in the conversation. Caller.
Hello.
Hey, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks for calling.
No problem. I just had a comment. It's so crazy that I turned on the radio and the topic is appeals. I literally just left the courthouse to mail in my brief for an appeal from that my ex-husband is doing that did to me. So I had to respond, and it's just because he's angry. This is a divorce. It's a long-term marriage. Like, he just is trying to reverse everything that was already approved during the order. Like, he's disregarding the whole divorce decree.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy. And the only thing that I really didn't like, these appeals kept haunting me. I was getting appeal notices in the mail every month, and because they kept giving him extensions. I didn't like that.
Okay.
So finally, after 1 year, they just approved accepted his brief, and just last month. So now I have 30 days to respond, which I'm literally just leaving the post office to get, the facts and findings. It's just a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a lot of work that I didn't know that I was going to have to do, and all this research. Luckily, my brother's in law school, so he helped me
There
out
we
a
go.
little bit. But it was just like, that's money I didn't, attorneys fees and all that stuff is expensive. But
Right. Well, and I'm sure that it's mentally draining too, that you're just emotionally and just,
oh my goodness.
Yeah, just from having to continue
Exactly.
this whole conversation again where you thought you were done.
Yep.
I thought I was going to be done.
And I would say deadlines are really, really important in appeals. So what you have to do is, if there's a 30-day deadline, you have to do that within 30 days, because otherwise you might lose your appeal.
Yeah, I just did. And
you don't have to be fancy. You don't need an attorney.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to write things out. And also, I know the Milwaukee Bar Association and Marquette Law School, they have clinics where people can go and ask them for help. So if someone is facing an appeal, there's places you can go.
Wow.
But it's just as simple as, if you write everything out and you don't have your fancy headings and things, if you do all that, the Court of Appeals is still going to look at that. So, but the important thing I would say for everyone out there is, don't miss your deadlines.
Okay, now here's our deadline. Debo is in the background telling me we have got to go. So, caller, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Judge,
Debo,
I'm gonna say,
it's Mel. Tell
there
me
we
Mel,
go.
he knows me.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And Judge
you.
Maria LAZAR, thank you for coming a second time.
Absolutely.
I think we're going to have you for a third time, because they keep calling with new stuff.